Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island and Hofstra University, the co-sponsors of tonight's event. My name is Benjamin Rifkin, and I am professor of Russian at Hofstra University, and I am delighted to welcome you tonight to the first of a series of events in which we will be exploring life cycle rituals from the perspectives of a variety of faith traditions. Before I go any further, I do want to tell you that we are recording this event, and the recording will ultimately be public through the Interfaith Institute of New York. As I said, my name is Ben Rifkin. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island, and I am the host for tonight's event. Tonight's event is focused on traditions of welcoming a child in accordance with the perspectives and practices of the following religious traditions, which I am listing in alphabetical order of the name of the religion: Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, Judaism, and Sikhism. Before we begin this evening's journey of interfaith exploration, I'm delighted to introduce you to the chairman of the board of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island, a physician and one of the founding members of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island, Dr. Farooq Khan. Dr. Khan?
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island, which was established 6 years ago in October 2015. The goal here is basically to allow and present a platform for members of different backgrounds, faiths, ethnicities, to share a common platform where we can learn from one another, develop collaborations, friendships, break down barriers. And over the past 6 years, we have done this through book discussions, holidays, Passover holiday, Eid holiday, and more recently, the Diwali festival, which was very well received. And this series of events is the brainchild of our moderator, Ben Rifkin, who has planned a series of 4 talks. The first one being, when you arrive in this world, what happens in different faiths? And we look forward to hearing the different presentations. And at the end of the day, there'll be a lot of common features. And that's the goal, basically, to emphasize on the commonalities. Previous programs have been on the website, and I'm pleased to inform all of you that now we have a YouTube channel as well. And once we get the recording, we'll transfer it to both the website as well as the YouTube channel. More recently, we've received quite a few invitations from various school districts in Long Island to present some programs, and several members on the panel today have participated in those programs, and the feedback has been just phenomenal. So with that said, thank you, Ben, for putting this together, and it's all yours now.
It isn't a Zoom meeting until somebody forgets to unmute themselves. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Before we begin with our presentations about specific religions, it's my pleasure to share with you a video created by Dr. Bhadra Shah. It's important for us, who is, by the way, I would say, let me say an adherent of the Hindu faith, and who is also an OBGYN. It's important for us in our conversation today to center ourselves in approaching our understanding of the life cycle rituals from the perspective of the moment of the child's birth itself. So bear with me as I share my screen. And this is, I promise you, as you'll see, a very short video.
Event of birth. What is birth? It is a transition from confines of mother's womb to the vast earthly universe Welcome to our world. Congratulations. You successfully negotiated the narrowest and little crooked path. Your umbilical cord, physical connection with Mum was severed. Someone hangs you upside down and gently slapped on your back with love. You cried and made everyone happy and smile. You open your eyes to see light of this world. Your eyes searching for your mum. Moving forward. Cozy, warm and dark residence is gone. Still covered with blood and amniotic fluid. You with your mother and father. Happiness and joy all around you. You started sucking on your fingers. Mum is ready and eager to feed her little creation. Now you have to breathe, drink and eat yourself. Now you're ready to explore a new world. Know who you are. Know who all others are. Know what this world is all about.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shah, for putting that together for us. And now we will begin with presentations by individuals representing their faith traditions. We'll be proceeding in alphabetical order of the name of the religions. And so for that reason, we are turning our attention first to Christianity. Speaking about Christianity's way of welcoming a child is Reverend Thomas Goodhue, who is a United Methodist clergyman who has led the Long Island Council of Churches for 17 years. Reverend Goodhue is also a member of the board of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island. Reverend Goodhue, the floor is yours, and I am muting myself. Reverend Goodhue, you are muted.
Dear me. Okay, now I'm live. Okay, thank you. Let's try it again. In Christianity, the ritual that we use to welcome a child into the church is called baptism in most branches of Christianity. In baptism, the parents make promises to raise the child within the faith, and the community surrounds the child and welcomes the child and promises to help the parents to raise the child in the faith. And for that reason, it almost always happens as part of a regular worship service. You know, a Sunday morning, Saturday, if you have Saturday worship services in your tradition. In baptism, I guess it takes some different forms, but that's basically in most parts of Christianity. It's usually a baby that is being baptized, with the exception of the Baptist churches and a few others that practice what is often called believer's baptism or adult baptism. In these traditions, you would typically, a child would be welcomed with something slightly different called a dedication ceremony or a consecration ceremony, which the parents make similar promises to raise the child within the faith, but the child is not actually sprinkled or dipped in water, and the baptism is held often for a later age in which the child is thought to be old enough to make the promises for themselves. though often that's not really adulthood. It may still be a child as young as 4 or 5 years old deciding to be baptized. In my tradition, though, baptism in the United Methodist Church, baptism happens something like this. First, the parents bring the child in the middle of the worship service to the front of the church. They often are surrounded by other members of their family, siblings, grandparents often come, and usually godparents come too, who have been asked to take on the responsibility of helping to raise the child within the faith, and just generally helping to raise the child. So that all is done, I think, as a way of symbolizing that we're not individuals, but we are surrounded by families as we come. In my tradition, then what happens next is a member of the congregation presents the child for baptism formally, saying, I present so-and-so to be baptized. It often names the child and may introduce the child to the congregation, which is a way of symbolizing both that we are part of a community of faith, but also that we're unique individuals within it. The pastor then asks the parents and the godparents if they reject evil and repent of their sin, if they accept the freedom and power that God gives us to resist evil in all forms and injustice, to resist oppression, and if they promise to serve the church in union with to follow Jesus and serve Jesus in union with the church which Christ has opened to all ages, nations, and races. Some of us think there's really only one race, the human race, but I say it this way anyway, because it's important to reject racism, which I think is the point of that question. The pastor then asks the parents and the godparents to promise to nurture the child in the church, and to lead a life which exemplifies the Christian faith. Since the baptism welcomes the child into the whole Christian church, by the way, it's fine with us in Methodism if the godparents do not belong to a Methodist church, if they are part of another denomination, and in which case I will often say something like, will you promise to help this child to feel welcome in other parts of the Christian church, in other parishes and other congregations. Then the congregation promises to surround the child with a community of love and forgiveness, that they may grow in their trust in God, which symbolizes that Christianity is lived in communion and not lived in isolation, and that we need each other to faithfully follow Jesus. Then the pastor leads a prayer over a basin of water, which is typically held inside of a baptismal font. In that prayer, typically the pastor recalls God's saving acts as recorded in the Bible, from the creation of the world to the Exodus, to the baptism of Jesus by a fellow Jew, John the Baptist. And at that point, then the pastor sprinkles water or pours a little water from the font on the baby's forehead, and says a prayer of blessing, or over the baby also at that point or often kisses the baby's forehead, and says, I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. I often add some other words, as many United Methodists do, to explain what that means, since the Trinity's a very confusing concept and often leaves the impression that we worship three separate gods. So I will often say something like, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God who creates, redeems, and transforms our lives, as a way of trying to remind everybody that we are monotheists and that we really worship one God who just happens to act in many different ways. And then the congregation responds, and I should say too, there's one wrinkle that's different in Orthodox Christianity that's interesting. While they do not, they typically baptize babies rather than adult baptism. Like the Baptists, they think it should be by immersion. So The priest would typically dip the baby into the baptismal font instead of just pouring a little water on the forehead, and would do that 3 times as they say that they're baptizing the child. The congregation responds with joy and thanksgiving. We welcome you into the family of Christ. Sometimes the pastor walks the baby down the aisle so they can see up close who it is that they're promising to help raise in the church. Some pastors invite children to come up to the baptismal font to surround the child and to be the first to welcome, since kids are good at that, and their presence has a way of reminding the parents that they've just promised to make sure that their kids are in worship sometimes. The other thing that is not a formal part of our liturgy, but just really important in United Methodism, is you got to stick around for coffee hour afterwards so that everybody can ooh and ah at the baby and all of that. And that's where coffee hours where Methodists really have communion. I sometimes joke that it's not formally a sacrament in our church, but that's really where people feel fellowship often. It's in the chatting and noshing on something and having a cup of coffee afterwards. And often, especially on Long Island, it's often common too then that the family has the whole extended family and all of their friends come to a big party afterwards. And that's how babies are welcomed in the Christian church.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate that introduction and to our theme tonight. I do want to just take a moment to let everybody know that after the initial presentations by our panelists tonight, representing the various faith traditions, we're going to have some discussion among the panelists so that they can ask each other questions and make observations about interesting perspectives on the life cycle event of welcoming a child. And after that, we're going to open up to questions for all attendees, and I'll explain how we'll be doing that when we get to that point. Our next religious tradition is Hinduism. And speaking about Hinduism will be Mr. Narinder Kapoor. Mr. Kapoor is the Senior Vice President of the Gita Ashram of New York and a member of the Board of Directors of the Long Island Multi-Faith Forum. Please, Narinder, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you to the entire panel. It's a very unique opportunity to discuss this phenomenal event which happened in the life of everybody. We were all kids, became the same way. According to Hinduism, the theory of reincarnation kicks in when the newborn baby comes in the womb of the prospective mother. And it's a very profound belief that it is not the choice of the child, but according to the net result of his karma and the theory of reincarnation, he is ordained to a particular mother in the particular womb. So having said that, when the child comes in the womb of the prospective mother and see the light of this planet, it is a phenomenal event. And the entire family is very happy, even before and after. So what happens as long as the baby and the newborn baby and the mother, they are in the hospital, when they come to home, they are separated from the family for approximately 11 to 13 days, so that there should not be any infection. And after that period of time, both the baby, newborn baby, and the mother, they take bath. And one of these days, during these 11 days, when the baby opens the mouth, a very senior member of the family who is intelligent and well read and well respected, he writes on the tongue of the newborn baby with the honey the symbol of divinity, which is called Om, O-M. And he writes in the word of Sanskrit, it's a particular way to write. So that he is welcoming the baby to this real world with the inscription of that particular symbol on his tongue that he should be a spiritual man. So the whole family gathered, and after another 1 week, a priest from the temple, Hindu temple, he is invited to the home to perform a ceremony, and he narrates very, he's a great individual in terms of Hindu religion, and he knows all the rituals. So he recites Vedic mantras, the Vedas, that is the oldest tradition of Hinduism. A particular mantras are narrated, and the fire is lit. We call it a Havan, H-A-V-A-N, and it's like a bonfire. And the entire family sits around that fire, and the priest continues to recite the mantras. After that ritual is over, then the baby is given a name. And the process of naming the baby is very unique. The particular time, the day, the hour, the second, it is given, this information is given to the Hindu priest. And according to the horoscope, he makes a horoscope of the child. He gives the alphabet to the parents. So let us, for example, he will say M. So you, the family members, picks up the names starting with M. So my name is Narendra, they picked up N. So there are about 50 names starting with N, but it is the choice of the family to pick up the most suitable name, because each name has a particular meaning. It is not at random. Like my name is Narendra means a person who is compassionate and who will lead the society. That is the name, my name. So that naming ceremony is conducted by the priest by giving the alphabet, the first letter, and the family picks up that letter and they choose the name. And after a couple of months, because the baby has the original hair on his head, and there is a tradition that all the hairs must be shaven. So it is called Mundan, M-U-N-D-A-N ceremony. It is a very important integral part of this ceremony. And the same priest comes in, the barber is invited in home. So he shaves the child's head. And then the child is picked up by all the elders, hugged, kissed, and given it back to the mother. And in Hindu traditions, we never ever mention that what particular religion he will follow. That information is missing. So because Hinduism is an inclusive faith, it does not put you in the box. It is an out-of-box religion. So that information is never communicated to the child. He gets that information from other social circles, but the parents never ever stress that you are a Hindu and you have to follow Hinduism. No. It's a way of life. So he starts his own choice, the baby, when he grows up. And going back to the newborn baby, it is the mother's choice, okay, which type of milk has to be fed. But initially it is the breastfed milk, but later on the alternate milk is available for the baby. And I think I shared with you enough information. If there would be any question, I would be more than happy to address. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kapoor. We will definitely have time for questions later. And so please, everyone, during all the presentations, make notes of your questions so that you can ask them later. I think part of the process for us is comparative. And so in listening to all the different presentations, more questions will come to us. So our next religious tradition to consider is Islam. And speaking about Islam will be Ms. Daisy Khan. Ms. Khan is the founder and executive director of the Women's Islamic Initiative and Spirituality, based here in New York. And she is also a member of the executive board of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island. Ms. Khan, could you please unmute yourself and begin?
Thank you so much. I think I'm unmuted now, right? Okay, so I will begin with some Quranic verses, what the Quran actually says about creation. God says in the Quran, we did create humans from clay, and then we placed a drop of sperm in place of rest, firmly fixed. Then we made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood. Then of that clot, we made a fetus lump. Then we made out of that lump bones and clothed the bones with flesh. Then we developed out of it another creature by breathing into it. So blessed be God, the most marvelous creator. And to follow up with that, the prophet then said, each one of you is constituted in the womb of the mother for 40 days. And then he becomes a clot of thick blood for a similar period, and then a piece of flesh for a similar period. Then God sends an angel who's ordered to write 4 things. He is ordered to write down his deeds, his livelihood, his date of death, and whether he will be blessed or wretched in religion. And then the soul is breathed into him. Based on the above Quranic verse and hadith, which is prophetic saying, it is inferred that the soul, which is all called ruh in Arabic, enters the fetus at about 4 months, 120 days after gestation. And when the fetus reaches 120 days, 4 months, it no longer remains a lifeless object. It is a living human being. And abortion is absolutely forbidden after that, which actually is the first trimester. Immediately after the delivery, the first thing a Muslim child must hear is God's name. After that spank and that cry, the first thing you should hear is God's name. So the child is blessed with the adhan, which is the Muslim call to prayer, which is whispered into the newborn's ear by any member of the family who's able to do it. The call to prayer instills God consciousness into the child's mind, and the child also witnesses the Muslim article of faith called the Shahada, which is the first article of the Muslim faith, the Shahada, which means, I bear witness that there is no God except the one God. I bear witness that Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of God. So this is the adhan that you always hear before Muslims make the prayer, and that is what is, read into the child's ear. The baby has to be breastfed by the mother for 2 years, or at least receive the mother's milk for 2 years. If the child rejects the mother's milk, a wet nurse may do so. Prophet Muhammad was fed by a wet nurse named Halima. And a wet nurse is equivalent to your mother. Her children are not marriageable to you because it basically builds a bond of a blood bond between those who have been fed the milk. Now also in these days, in modern times, because some women have difficulty pumping breast milk, so they can resort to pumping the milk ahead of time, or people can even get milk from other mothers. That's not an issue at all. Then the next ritual in a baby's life is one of circumcision, which only takes place for a boy. It's the major rite of passage, although it is not Quranic, it basically follows the Jewish tradition. It occurs between the ages of 2 to 7, sometimes even with infants. And but there is no equivalent ceremony for girls. I want to make it very clear, female genital mutilation is not Islamic practice. It's just a practice that is a cultural practice. The day before the circumcision, the boy is bathed, his head is shaved, his mother, there is a sacrifice made in his honor. A feast is prepared for friends, neighbors, relatives. Guests bring small gifts. And sometimes the households will wait for an Eid function or a marriage in the family, or arrange with other households to have their children circumcised together. And the boy is dressed in very fine clothes, almost like groom-like, and accompanied by musicians. Sometimes in some cultures, the child is even led around town on a mule. In the past, in some areas, his clothes would have resembled those of a bride. And elements of the ceremony are almost parallel to those of a child, of a marriage. Then there is another ceremony could be on the 7th, 14th, 40th, or 70th day, depending on what culture you come from. It's called akika. Depending on the school of thought, this is performed to bless the baby and make a charitable contribution on behalf of the child. The ceremony requires that the baby's birth hair be shaved, because the birth hair is not healthy. It's to be removed, and then the hair is measured against gold or silver, depending on your economic status, and its equivalent value is to be donated to the poor. But if you don't give that, then you can slaughter an animal and have its meat distributed to the poor. This is also the first time the baby is announced to the greater community and seen by the larger community. And of course, the people shower the baby with a gift. There is a fatwa issue that says that if an akika was not performed in a child, in the child's childhood, then it is actually valid on to one's death. So it can be performed anytime after that. There is also another ceremony which does not always take place. It's not necessary, but with people who are religious people, the ceremony is called Bismillah. And it literally means the child learns how to recite the words of the Quran. And not only are they reciting it, they're reciting it publicly in Arabic in front of people. And it's to show that the child can read the Quran and perform the prayers properly. It can be done anytime for both boys and girls between ages 4 to 5, sometimes even up to 10. And the child is usually dressed in traditional clothes with jewelry, and they're made to recite this publicly in front of the whole community. This is not part of Islam. It is a cultural celebration that takes place mostly in the subcontinent in countries such as Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, because we're non-Arab speaking countries. So we take great pride in the fact that we can learn the Quran in Arabic. These are the rituals, and I just had a few photos, which I will just do that, and then I will just conclude. So this is the photo of somebody. I don't know why I can't move this now. So this is maybe a father or a cousin or brother, reciting the call to prayer in the ear. This is a mother doing the recitation in the baby. These are little circumcised boys dressed in, looking like grooms. And this would be a ceremony, a Bismillah ceremony for a little girl, and this would be a Bismillah ceremony for a young boy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khan. Ms. Khan, that was just beautiful, and the pictures are always wonderful to see. Our next religious tradition that we're exploring tonight is Jainism. And speaking about Jainism is Dr. Panna Shah. Dr. Shah is a retired primary care physician and has been involved in multi-faith activities for over 25 years. She's also a member of the executive board of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island. Dr. Shah, please unmute yourself if you haven't. Okay.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you to Interfaith Institute for organizing this wonderful program. Already I'm learning so much, so many traditions that are different than what I'm about to say. In Jainism, we do not have particular ceremony when a baby is born, but because of the cultural and religious superimposition in India, we have adapted some of the Hindu ceremony, like naming of the baby or mundan that Mr. Kapoor described. What I would limit myself is to the Jain way. And I think we also heard earlier that because of the karma of certain baby, the baby finds the womb. In Jainism, it is described as auspicious dreams of a pregnant woman are described in Jain texts that forecast the virtues of the unborn child. They were seen by mother of our renowned Tirthankar or god Mahavir and interpreted as virtue or kinship of the future child. Each year, even today, during our annual Holy Week, Jain monks narrate those dreams. There are 14 of them, and they are also displayed in the silver model or artwork. I will narrate and with the meaning when white elephant with the 4 tusks is believed to bring the child good character. A bull brings a great religious teacher quality. A lion indicates power, strength, and fearlessness in overcoming enemies. Dream of Lakshmi or goddess of wealth brings the child wealth and prosperity. Pair of garland indicates popularity and respect. Dream of moon indicates peace and possibly child will help others. Dream of sun indicates superior knowledge. Flag with a picture of lion indicates leadership. Pair of fishes indicates handsomeness. So all this is described, and I have few more. Kalash or jug filled with lotus. It is perfect with virtues and full of compassion. Lake indicates unattachment to the worldly possessions. Celestial palace or chariot indicates angels would respect or honor spiritual teachings. Heap of jewels indicates virtue and wisdom. And last one is smokeless fire. When a mother dreams of, it indicates the baby will reform and restore religious order. So these are the dreams that even today we during that week we narrate, and there are ceremonies related to that. But today's time, parents' greatest wish for their children is to be happy, healthy, intelligent, successful, and selfless. It takes a core and extended family and community, culture and tradition and religion, and a responsible way of life to raise a child. Practice of Jain way of life in thought, word, and action ensures happy, healthy, and balanced children. The following are some practical, I have enumerated some practical and effective actions which will help a Jain child to follow, internalize, and cherish a Jain way of life. This can be a parent's gift to their children, which will last a lifetime and will be carried through many generations. So as long as the baby starts walking and talking, there are certain behaviors that parents are hoping to do it with the child. First is the greeting, Jai Jinendra. Every day, whenever in the morning, parents say it, and that means I bow to the soul in you. To give respect or care to the elders, touch their feet, and being peaceful in all the interactions. Make a habit of daily prayer, but possibly with family. Mother and father are expected that they be respectful in front of the child and be an example. Learning parents' language is emphasized, as well as vegetarian diet. Jain vegetarian diet is quite strict in terms of no meat, poultry, egg, and seafood. Root vegetables are avoided because harvesting of which involves the killing of entire plant. Temple visits should be made interesting and rewarding. Pathshala or Jain school are emphasized to learn about Jainism and welcome friends at home, meet relatives, to exchange positive behavior and let kids be respectful to them too. If a big bug comes in the environment, gently remove it away, and maybe they should know, a child should know, we don't kill living being, and practice recycling enthusiastically and teach them. Lastly, 5 great vows are instilled, and they are ahimsa, truthfulness, non-stealing, aparigraha or simplicity, and anekantvad or view of multiplicity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. That was wonderful. Our next religious tradition is Judaism. And speaking about Judaism will be Rabbi Jody Sif. Rabbi Sif serves at the Reconstructionist Synagogue of the North Shore, where she also leads the synagogue school and runs Rosh Chodesh groups for women and girls. And I see, Dr. Sif, that Rabbi Sif, that you've already unmuted yourself. Thank you.
Hi, so it's so wonderful to hear all the different traditions and see the similarities and where there are differences. When I think about the idea of what it means to welcome young people and their families into Judaism through the idea of ritual marking, it comes with the word in Hebrew brit, which means a covenant, a connection. And so the question is, who is the connection with? Is it with God? Is it with community? Is it with family? And I think that for different people, it's different things. And so I enter into each experience with each family that I encounter with this idea of how do they want to engage in this Brit, into this covenant, this connection. And I even forgot, for some people, it's even God. And how do we define the concept of God? That's another really wonderful lens in which I try to open my mind when I engage in that question. So inherent in the idea of a covenant, a Brit, is the idea that each Jewish person, whether by birth or by conversion, belongs to that covenant, belongs to that Brit, and is part of it. Not so much as a statement of belief, which is something that I kept on writing when I was listening to each of us. Not so much of a statement of belief, but more simply as a state of being. So you are in that covenant just because you exist from a Jewish family or have decided, and we're doing children, or if you've decided to convert into the Jewish people. So whether you believe or follow all the words of the Torah or the halakha, the Jewish law, just by being, you are a part of the Jewish people. That's not to say that we don't have rituals and traditions around welcoming children into our community. We do. And I think when I think about ritual, I think about the idea that it's symbols and rituals and emotions that help us to transition from one space to the next. And by doing that ritual, by having that transition, it allows us to enhance our lives psychologically, socially, and spiritually, and appreciate the connection to religious culture and heritage. So these rituals that I'm going to talk about, I think, mark this liminal experience of coming from one place to the next. It might be for the baby, it might be for the parents, it might be for the grandparents or the community that's there who's experiencing that transition and acknowledging that connection that we are forming with community, family, God. So it is definitely, and one of the panelists spoke about the difference between gender, sex, that we welcome Jewish children, and that's also changing. So there are people who do not want it to be gender specific or sex specific, but I'm going to specify right now about this. So according to halakha, which is Jewish law, for baby boys, that what marks you entering into the covenant of the Jewish people is Brit Milah, which means the covenant of cutting, circumcision. And it happens on the 8th day that the child is born, from the child being born. And the ritual is that it's a covenant between the father and the son. And actually, the rite stipulates that it's the father's responsibility to circumcise his son. Even though today, most fathers that I have seen recite this Hebrew formula that appoints a mohel to act as his agent. But that is the tradition is the father is supposed to do the circumcision. So they say this blessing to change the agency, and the mohel, who is the person who is trained to be able to do the circumcision, takes on the role of ritually circumcising the son on behalf of the father. So that's the tradition for a boy baby. For a girl baby, a halakha, there's not so much Jewish law. There's more of a minchag, and a minchag means a custom. And the custom was in tradition that the first day that the Torah is read after the baby's birth, so it could be a Monday, a Thursday, or a Shabbat, the father gets called up to the Torah and gives the child a name. And that is what really welcomed the young girl into the baby into the Jewish people. So we see these things as constantly evolving and changing. And so when we think about these welcoming ceremonies, we have this idea of a covenant. And so the covenant is actualized by circumcision or by the idea of Torah. There's also the component of bringing the child in, not only to connection to God or to community, but bringing the child into the individual family. And we do this by naming. So how do we name? We name by, in Sephardic culture, which is usually in Spanish and Portuguese and speaking communities, and also in some Middle Eastern Jewish communities, the idea that you would name after someone who's living. In Ashkenazi Jewish communities, which is Eastern European, you name only after people who have died. And so when you have a mixed marriage, in a sense, of Ashkenazi and Sephardic, there's different opinions about how you name children. So the structure of these welcoming ceremonies have a covenantal piece, which could be circumcision or welcoming a girl by doing a foot washing or a talit wrapping, which is the shawl that is has ties on the end, which are the seat that recognize the idea of commandments. It could be a candle lighting. It could be called up to the Torah, the idea of ritually connecting her to the Jewish people. And then doing a naming, which specifies the name to the world and connects her or him to the family that they are connecting with. So the idea of naming, I don't know if anyone has ever seen that after a Jewish child is born, traditionally, they're called baby girl or baby boy until the day that they get named, the 8th day for a Jewish boy, and whenever they do a girl's naming. So when I had my children, and we sent out the announcement of the ritual experience, we did say baby boy Sifshur or baby girl Sifshur is welcomed, and we invite you to join us. But traditionally, you're not even supposed to invite people. You're not supposed to obligate people by inviting them. It's just something that's known in the community that this is happening and anyone can attend. So after we do the naming piece of it, it's the idea of blessings and how can we bless the children and the family. And I traditionally do it by offering them a yivarechacha, a blessing of peace and connection. And the idea of it is that the family has this blessing and this connection, and that we as a community are here to support them on this journey. So thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing our next speaker.
Thank you, Rabbi Sif. Our next and final this evening religious tradition to explore is Sikhism. And that tradition will be presented by Ms. Anu Bindra. She practices the Sikh way of life with her husband and 2 sons and has been participating in interfaith activities for over a decade. Ms. Bindra is also a member of the board of directors of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island. Ms. Bindra, please unmute yourself if you haven't already.
Hello. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me here today. Well, I would like to begin this presentation by giving you a little bit of background about who Sikhs are. So that is if I can get my, okay. Well, the word Sikh is derived from a Sanskrit word called Shishya, meaning student. So Sikhism was founded by Guru Nanak in the 15th century. Like you have the 10 commandments in Christianity, we have 10 gurus who promoted inclusiveness and union with God for all, irrespective of gender, caste, race, or religion. Guru Gobind Singh, our 10th guru, decreed that after his death, the 6 scriptures in the form of the religious book called the Guru Granth Sahib should be followed and command the same respect and authority as a living guru. Sikhism is a monotheistic religion, and the ultimate goal of our life is to achieve liberation from the cycle of birth and death, and ultimately be one with the divine. So, well, we believe that every child contains the divine spark of the Creator. So for a Sikh, the point at which a baby is conceived represents the soul's entry into the world. So conception is therefore a sacred act which is carried out within the confines of a marriage that has been blessed in front of the Guru Granth Sahib. Namkaran. Well, many Sikhs will name their baby on the 40th day after the birth in a simple naming ceremony. A prayer or ardas is recited, and the Guru Granth Sahib is opened at random, and the first alphabet from the top of the left page is used as the first alphabet to name the baby. Well, Sikh parents may choose to name, a baby without the ceremony, and yet others will get an aunt or a very close relative to choose the name. Well, all Sikh names usually have some religious meaning and are unisex, right? To emphasize the equality of human beings, all Sikh men will add the name Singh, or meaning lion, to the forename of a son, and Kaur, meaning princess, for girls. Basically, this was a presentation I was going to present for my next one. It's called the Amrit Sanskar, which is the baptism ceremony where you take the holy waters. But I'd like to personalize my presentation by telling you a little bit about, I don't know whether you guys noticed, I was introduced as Anu Bindra, but my official name is Tajinder Kaur. And like we all have a specific meaning to our name, my name means, Inder means senses and Tej means sharp. So somebody who has very sharp senses and is aware. Well, these are my twins. I have two boys, and I'd like to share a story of how I decided to name them. My oldest son is Angad. He's named after our second guru. And my younger son, his name is Arjan. I decided to name him after our fifth guru. Guru Angad actually taught us the art of obedience. And when I was pregnant with my twins, and I used to go to the gynecologist, Angad was never to be found. So I prayed and I was like, I hope to God he turns out to be obedient. And Arjan was always sitting quietly in one spot. So I named him Guru Arjan after our fifth guru, who taught us the art of patience. So, every Sikh name has a meaning to it. So this was the name I chose for my children. And basically, there was something else I wanted to discuss with you guys, which I think I forgot because I got a little nervous. I think that is what I wanted to share with everybody. Is that if anybody has any questions, I'm open to answering them. And I hope you guys enjoy the presentation. And thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bindra. And if you could, thank you. So at this point, I want to ask all of our panelists who presented tonight to unmute themselves. I'd like to open up for a few minutes of observations and questions and comments that you may have for one another. I personally can say that I was more familiar with some traditions than with others, and learned so much even tonight about Christianity, living in a country that is majority Christian. So I thank all of you. I even learned some things about Judaism, and I am a Jew. So thank you, Rabbi Jody, for that. So questions, observations, and comments from the panelists. Dr. Khan, Farouk.
I was just curious, Mr. Kapoor, when he gave a presentation, talked about only the boys. Are rituals the same for the boys and the girls, or are there any differences?
Dr. Farouk, yes, it is the same. They are all newborn babies, so there's no distinction between what either a boy or a girl.
Okay.
Yeah. But thank you very much. It was a very profound question. Thanks.
Narinder, I have another question for you. You talked about fire being a part of the naming ceremony. Since I now live in an apartment building, it occurs to me, what do Hindus do if they live in a co-op? I mean, or is this something people do in the temple, or if they do it at home? I mean, how would you do this if you,
Tom, first of all, I compliment you. I have seen you after a long time. Your question is very legit, and this ceremony can be performed either in the premises of the temple or in your own home, where you invite more close relatives and friends. And the process of the ceremony is the same.
how big of a fire are we talking about?
Fire, let me say, fire is the eyewitness. There are 5 elements, gross elements with which our earth is made of. It is the fire, the air, the water, the sky, and earth. These 5 elements is the core of Hinduism. It is more to respect the nature, and that is why we selected fire, because it purifies. It purifies the individual inside out, and it is adored at most of the Hindu festivals. This is the witness, and there are very profound mantras from Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, which we recite by lighting the fire. And so fire is the integral part of Hinduism.
I have an observation to share. It didn't occur to me until listening to the presentations tonight that the religious traditions that we discussed this evening can be grouped in 2 categories, with Islam as presented tonight as sort of a bridge between the two. The religious traditions that grew up in the Middle East, so that would be Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the religious traditions that grew up in South Asia. And there we have Hinduism, Jainism, and Sikhism, and Islam taking firm root also in that area, and especially as Daisy, as you explained in your particular background. And it's interesting to me to observe that the traditions that we discussed tonight that are native to South Asia seem to be, from what I understood, and if I'm incorrect, please correct me, not exclusive and embracing traditions in the region. So, for instance, Narinder, you said that the baby isn't welcomed as a Hindu, but discovers that along the way. And we recently had the Diwali celebration through the Interfaith Institute, and I learned that Diwali is a holiday that is celebrated not only by Hindus, but by other faith traditions in the region. Whereas Christianity and Judaism, Christianity, and Islam seem to be more exclusive in the terms of individual identity belonging to one of those faiths and traditions. And so my question for all of you is, am I understanding that correctly? And is this in any way connected to the geographies of South Asia and the Middle East?
Ben,
so interesting.
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
In the Eastern religions, Hinduism is the big tree. And out of those trees, there are branches. Their mother tree is Hinduism, because it is more than 10,000 years before. And all other faiths related, like Abrahamic faith, there are 3: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. In Hinduism, that is the mother tree, out of which 3 main branches: Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism. These are the 3 main branches. Their mother tree is Hinduism, because that is the oldest, 10,000 years and even beyond. You cannot put the time tag. So that is the reason that all faiths, Eastern faiths, more or less celebrate all social events almost in the same way.
Fascinating.
If I can say something, with due respect to what Mr. Kapoor said, Jainism also is very, very old religion. We have 24 Tirthankar, or the renowned, what we treat like God. We don't call them God, but they are like, we worship them like God. And our last Tirthankar was 2600 years ago. And we don't know when was it is like a timeless. So Hinduism is one of the very old, but so is Jainism. But through the thousands of years of association of cultural side by side in a very populated, and I see Anu nodding, even Sikhism, we all have cultural overlap, and that may be the reason of similarity.
On the flip side, Sikhism is the youngest religion. We're just,
Correct.
we're just barely in our infancy right now. So, and Guru Nanak, our first guru, was a Hindu. He came from a Hindu family. So,
Bindra, you are right.
And I'm wondering if Tom, Jody, Daisy, if you want to say anything about the exclusivity of the Abrahamic religions. Am I understanding that correctly?
Sort of. I would say that is the story we tell ourselves. However, certainly speaking as a Christian, we've borrowed a whole lot from Judaism, and we've probably borrowed stuff from other people too. I mean, in fact, you can almost trace that as Christianity expanded and moved around the world, every culture and nearly every faith it interacted with gave something to Christianity. That sometimes Christians acknowledge the debt and sometimes they don't. So, I mean, baptism that we use to welcome a baby was clearly something that we learned from a branch of Judaism. Now, John the Baptist, it turns out, was kind of on the fringes of Judaism to some extent. And the fact that he was venerated by an offshoot, the Mandeans, made it even, more, I suppose, harder to acknowledge the debt that we owed to Judaism for baptism, because it became associated with some group that never became Christian. It never, wasn't really fully Jewish and didn't ever fully become Christian. So, but I think there's a difference. One thing that I admire about Jainism and Hinduism is this tendency to not draw hard lines between them and other faith communities, whereas, like, one thing that Christianity struggles with, I struggle with, is a tendency to look upon everybody who left the fold as a heretic. It's very hard to convince fellow Christians that somebody like, say, the Mormons or the Moonies, which are probably not are certainly not Orthodox Christians, that they know something, that they know anything, and that they should be treated with some dignity and respect, even if they're really not part of our tribe anymore. That just seems to me much more easily to my friends who are Jain, who just don't seem to have the same issue and same difficulty in looking at other faith communities that many Christians do.
Daisy and Jody, thoughts about the question of exclusivity?
Yeah, I think that I say that our contemporary ceremonies are a midrash, which is a commentary on this moment in time. So in this idea of exclusivity, I think I see things as constantly evolving, and our welcoming structure and ceremonies in America are very different than our Jewish welcoming ceremonies in Israel. Or, there are threads that are the same, but they're all midrashim. They're all commentaries of the reality of what the world that they're living in. And so I think it also depends on if you're talking to me as a Reconstructionist Jew, if you were speaking to someone who had more of orthodoxy in Judaism about exclusivity. What am I comfortable in welcoming? As a Reconstructionist Jew, I accept Jewish children from a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother, right? And whereas there are some components of our, sex and Judaism that don't. So exclusivity is not universal across Judaism. And so I think I like the word midrash when it comes to that. The idea that it's a commentary on this moment in our time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Daisy, before we wrap this part up, do you have any comments about this issue from the perspective of Islam?
Yeah, so it may, in the presentation, it may appear that we are exclusive, but actually, when you think about it, Islam is the final revelation of the preceding revelation. So we actually do not distinguish between the major milestones. So for instance, there are 3 major milestones. There's birth, there's marriage, and there's death. And we borrow either from Judaism or from Christianity. So for instance, our birthrights are very similar to Judaism. We do have also naming. It's not that hard and fast, but there are some cultures where they have very elaborate naming ceremonies. We do have the circumcision, which is borrowed really from the Jews because it's not even in the Quran. Where we depart from is on baptism, because our theology says that every human being is born pure, has no sin. So a child does not have to go through any kind of a, cleansing. So this is why we do not call it baptism, or there's no dipping in the water. It's just, so where no one comes with an original sin. Our death ceremonies are almost the same, identical. We have the burial, we have, the washing, the shrouding. So, so it may seem as though it is exclusive, but, it's, when you look at the overall trajectory, they're very similar. And it's because Islam has only recently taken root in the Western Hemisphere. It's rooted more in the East, everything from Persia to the subcontinent. So we have also borrowed some customary practices which are not inconsistent with Islamic theology. For instance, I believe that the shaving of the head actually comes from the subcontinent. From Narendra mentioned it. There's some wisdom in it, so we borrowed it. There's nothing wrong with it. You don't find that in the Middle East. People get really puzzled when they say, "Why are you shaving the baby's head?" And we're like, "Well, we have to." And I always tell people, my hair is so healthy is because my head was shaved off. So so we borrow a lot of customs. And for instance, in the Middle East, women mostly brides wear white. Traditionally, Muslim brides wear white in almost all cultures, except when you get to the subcontinent, we wear red, because that was the custom, and we didn't want to upset the custom by wearing white. Hindus Hindu widows wear white, so how can a bride wear white? So we adapted to that. So these are, we can actually go into this. This could almost be another presentation.
I think it should be.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, and I want to wrap it up so we have time for Q&A with our attendees. But I want to apologize. What I meant by inclusive and exclusive was actually a reference more to shared holidays, and I realized that was unclear. So that, for instance, when we were talking about Diwali at the Interfaith Institute session that we had previously. For me, that was really interesting to learn that this is a holiday shared by the 3 traditions, and that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have different holidays. And I didn't make that clear in my question, but it doesn't matter because we got really great discussion going. And so now what I'd like to do is in our remaining time, we have about 15 minutes, and I see that Dwight has already raised his hand, is to ask you, if you have a question, to either raise your hand and I'll call on people in the order in which they raise a hand, or you can put your question in the chat and I will read it for you if that's your preference. So Dwight, please share your question with us or comment.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this wonderful evening, I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. I thought, yeah, what am I? And I thought, you know what? I had registered and I'm really, really glad I showed up. So thank you to the panelists and thank you very much, Ben. I've worked with you before. You were magnificent, and thank you to the IFI. I do want to, I've known Tom Goodhue for years, and so I will politely say that I suspect that he might agree with me that there are exceptions to Christians who say that somebody who doesn't fall within that are labeled as heretics. There's a Star of David in a stained glass window in the church that I currently serve in Patchogue that was put there in 1893. And there's lots of different nuances, not around shared holidays. That was a clarification that was well put, but I was baptized at 43. So this could, by immersion. So all this could go on, and how different religions or different parts of Christianity relate to, like, ordination of LGBTQ people. There's a lot of things, ordination of women. My question, though, is a very simple one, and it's to Rabbi. It sounds to me like, I know that the father can assign the duty to somebody who is trained in bris, if that's the correct word.
A moil, yeah, the circumcision, yeah.
Yes, but it sounds like the father is responsible for the circumcision unless the duty is assigned. And the father also names the girl. Is that?
This is in traditional, like, Orthodoxy, that would be in according to halakha Jewish law, yeah.
Okay, so whether the child is boy or girl, it's the father who is involved with both of those very significant things. Is that correct?
So I would say I'm presenting that's the traditional. That is not at all what I did when I went through this. I have 4 kids, and the process that I went through in naming all 4 of my children was that we did it on the 8th day, whether they were biologically male or female. Both my husband and I gave permission to the mohel to do the circumcision. And for the naming, we both ritually did talit wrapping and candle lighting ceremonies, and then had the girls named. So yes, traditionally it was the male who was the father, who was the primary person who bestowed that, but that is not minhag or custom in many Jewish sects at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
I would like to add just about this, that as somebody who was born and raised as a Jew, but not in the Reconstructionist movement, one of the things that attracted me to become a Reconstructionist Jew was, from what I can tell, the absolute gender equality theologically, spiritually, practically. And so as the father of 2 children, married to a Christian woman, everything about the naming ceremonies for both our children were matters decided by my wife and me together, not as me just as the father. But I absolutely was not going to do that circumcision myself. And I assure you that, my son is the better off for it. So thank you for the question. Dr. Shah, your hand is up. Can you unmute? Yeah, there we go.
Yes, I think this was really and very interesting and learning experience for me, because I had delivered many babies. I have welcomed those little ones to this world so many times, and I never think of anything of this sort. I had done so many circumcisions that I can't believe that I always think that while welcoming the baby, that I'm welcoming a new form of God, and I want to see God. I do not want to seek God. So to me, I accept a new form of God and offer it to the Almighty. And I always say that when the baby comes, baby cries and all of us feels good. We smile and happy. So I want to bless that child that you live such a life that when you go, you smile and everybody cries. This is what I feel as a religion. And I really feel that if I would have known some of the things, perhaps I would not have done the circumcision. But of course, we do at the request of parents.
Mhm.
And doing circumcision also, I never thought of religion purpose. We always think of medically, that whether it is good or bad and baby should not feel the pain, that kind of thoughts comes. But also saying while welcoming the baby as a physician, I don't think whether this is a Jewish or a Christian or a Jain or whatever. What I think, what I want to see a very healthy, complete baby. The first person to be happy is to see that baby have a 10 fingers and 10 toes and everything is intact. Then we are happy. And before we offer or put the baby on the mother's tummy, I always pray to the God that thank God this baby has come out successfully and lead him to this journey of life the way you want, not the way he wants. The way is best for the baby. And I think it is really, really very rewarding to see so many different religions, customs. And once the baby goes to mother, then it starts in the journey and how. And also another question to all of you is that hospitals, we need the baby's name. So if the name is not given until this name given ceremony, how do we give this name to the hospital? Because baby will not go home from the hospital without the name. So names are selected, I guess, before the ceremony are done later. Is that true?
Yes. So for us, even though I'm not publicly telling anyone a name, I'm going to put on the birth certificate the name of the child. There is also a tradition, you know, especially if a child is in the hospital for any length of time, of the name that you give the child when they're in the hospital might not necessarily be the name that you call them once they're out of the hospital. So there are different traditions around it. But yes, most of Jewish kids do not leave the hospital, the hospital without a name on their birth certificate. It's about making the name public. I would say in modern day, you're not posting until the 8th day. I don't know if anyone thinks that's funny. It's trying to be kind of funny there. You know, the idea is it's not public. Okay.
And Jody, for a child that has medical problems and is in the hospital and might come home with a different name than the name that might have been used in the hospital, does that come from the idea of trying to avoid the angel of death?
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, that's the minhag, the custom of it. It's the idea that you're trying to almost trick the angel of death. It's the same thing as why in Ashkenazi Jewish culture that the what's it called again? The idea that why you wouldn't name someone after someone who's living is that you don't want the angel of death coming down and thinking that that little baby whose name's Samuel is the same Samuel who is 90 something years old. So you don't want to have them make that mistake. Same concept, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because I was born in India, so, you know, the naming of the baby after 40 days, that's why the name Anu stuck. But my official name is Tajinder. And when I was naming my own children, I made sure that I did the prayers at home. I took a hair shower. I went, I did the ardas. I opened the Guru Granth Sahib. The alphabet was A, and I got the two names. So that's the reason why now you cannot take the baby home without the name on the certificate. So we do this prior to going to the hospital so that we can choose the name at leisure rather than in a rush.
I think I will also describe my similar experience when I went to the hospital. and came home with twins. They were not diagnosed. This is many moons ago. And I was supposed to give two names all of a sudden, but I could change the name in within 6 months. So that was a blessing. So
You
Well,
know, I think it is a legal requirement to give the medical staff name for the newborn baby, but that is just a name. There is a traditional naming ceremony according to the tenets of the religion. And so medical name in the hospital is not the real name. I just want to share with you utmost humility.
Well, I think that the medical name in the hospital winds up getting into legal government state
Documents.
databases. Yeah. But you know, I think that we're getting out of the range of religious tradition here and into medical and legal things that are appropriate for a different webinar. We're gonna wrap up now, and I just want to say that I am so grateful to all of our panelists. I learned so much tonight, and could I just ask everyone to give some Zoom applause to all of our panelists? Oh, I like that. Yeah. And I want to thank also all of the attendees for coming tonight to learn and explore some of the spiritual paths of the religions of not only of the world, but also here of Long Island. And I want to share with you before we go just a couple of things. So first of all, I'm now sharing with you the website of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island. And the reason I've put this up is that I'm going to invite you to join us for our second life cycle ritual event, which will be on Thursday, December 9th from 7:30 to 9 p.m. And for those who are attending right now, you will automatically get an email communication from IFI inviting you to register for the December 9th event with details about the speakers and the topic. If you're watching this not live, if you're not attending, then here's the website and you can see it here. And also, just to make it easier, for those of you who are watching a recording, I will also show you the website in an easier way to see it, so that that's in the recording too. And remember, the date will be December 9th from Thursday, 7:30 to 9 p.m. And if you go to this website, if you haven't attended now, if you're watching this as a non-live recording, if you go to this website and go to the Contact Us button on the website, and you can write in the email to request to get the information about the December 9th event, and then you will get it. Please join us on December 9th. There will also be events in January and February as we explore the life cycle from birth, which we started today, through death and dying, which will be our final life cycle event, and that will be in February. So thank you all very much for coming, and I wish you all a beautiful celebration of any holidays that might be coming your way, including Thanksgiving. And for me, one of the things I'm thankful for is the Interfaith Institute of Long Island, the wonderful, wonderful people who made tonight's presentation possible, and all of the learning that I've done tonight about religious diversity. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.